The Oklahoma City Thunder fall tonight 111-107 to the Golden State Warriors with Brady Trantham. I'm Erik G. This is the Thunder Digest wrap-up show, and I don't even know what to make of this game, especially when you look at some of these guys' shooting percentage. Kevin Durant's leading scorer has 34 points tonight, but he was terrible from the floor. Paul George, I don't know what to make of him. All in all, if you were to put this game in two sentences, Brady, what would you say about it?
It was a really fun game to watch. It was a fun game. The Stars, I mean, despite Kevin Durant, like you said, having an off shooting night, one of 7 or 1 of 8 from the three-point line, really did a lot of his damage from the free throw line. Russell Westbrook had an amazing third quarter, kind of kept the Thunder afloat before they got kind of blown out in the second half. What it really came down to with the Thunder was just the bench production, and I think 7 or 8 missed free throws. I think 7 or 8 missed free throws. And in the game where it's just decided between a possession or two in the final minute, you can't help but look back at some of those missed opportunities and just think what could have been. And that's kind of been haunting the Thunder over the last 2 weeks, going back to that Boston loss.
Thunder go 28 of 37 from the charity stripe tonight, and that's been a problem all year long. I mean, some of the stuff that we're talking about are the issues that we talk about. It seems like on every game that the Thunder lose this year, and I still don't see a team that I think is ready for the playoffs. And Russell Westbrook had some very interesting comments tonight. He was asked by Dennis Scott if they can figure it out, and his answer was, yes, we can figure it out, and we're good. We're good in the locker room. We're good out on the court. It doesn't matter when anyone says outside of these walls, we're okay. I don't know of anyone, maybe other than myself and a Locked On Thunder podcast, just kind of hypothesizing about what the state of the Thunder might be after one particular game where Russ took it over and didn't pass to Melo or PG. But I don't remember that being a narrative that these guys aren't good in the locker room. And I think it's very interesting that Russ would just kind of divulge something like that in a post-game interview.
No, I mean he's absolutely right. I mean, this has been, I think, the 3rd or 4th home game in a row where we kind of look at Carmelo Anthony and Paul George's stat line. We combine them because they just haven't really hit a lot of their shots tonight. They go 9 of 35 from the floor, and when you have that performance, you have to look for other things like free throw percentage or bench production. And sadly for the Thunder, those two things didn't really come to fruition for them. The bench didn't really, outside of Alex Abrinas, who had an incredible dunk on Jordan Bell. So sorry, Jordan Bell, you've got to retire now. He went full-on Tristan Thompson on him, but that dunk that he had last year against the Cavs. Outside of Abrinas and a little bit of a performance from Jeremy Grant, Raymond Felton just didn't have his shot going. Patrick Patterson didn't have his shot going. And, it was just an off shooting night for the bench, and that's going to happen. But when that does happen, you hope that your stars are able to kind of make it happen. Russell Westbrook certainly did his part, and Paul and Melo, and they kind of said it as well in the postgame, where they got looks that they want, and they just didn't fall. But again, I feel like we've been saying this for the last 3 or 4 video recaps, that they just are missing shots that they otherwise would hit.
And unfortunately, there's not anything you can do about that but practice and eventually start making the shot. Now, Billy Donovan is keeping Paul George in for all 12 minutes of the first quarter. That's been at least a habit that he's got himself into, and then letting Paul George also play a little bit into the second quarter to try and get him in rhythm. Against New Orleans, he had a great first half, not such a great second half, and then tonight, he's putting a lot of the blame on himself, but unfortunately for the Oklahoma City Thunder, there aren't any easy cures. That's why I worry about the playoffs, because all these issues that should have been, that the Thunder have been having all year long, should have been taken care of by now. And it would sort of be understanding to have these issues late in the season, and as everyone gets tired and we're into the 40th home game of the year. But because they've been problems all year long, I don't think Thunder fans have much hope for this team rectifying itself and making some miraculous playoff run.
The only hope that you could probably have as a Thunder fan that you wouldn't really be laughed at in a way is this team is incredibly inconsistent, so for all we know, they could just turn it on in the postseason because they have been so inconsistent. But again, we've kind of talked about this before, and this is kind of a macro thing. It's not necessarily about this game that happened tonight. It's kind of a shame that you look at this season, how the team came to fruition in the offseason with Carmelo Anthony, Paul George coming to the team. And everybody knew this was kind of a one-year thing because it all hinges on whether Paul George stays or not. And you know, when you look back on other super teams that have been formed, it's always through a free agency deal. So you have like, this is year one of a multi-year process. For the Thunder, that's not the case, because for all we know, Paul George could just say, I've had fun, but you know, I'm going to head to the Lakers in the offseason. And if that's the case, it's just a large disappointment. But if this was a year one thing out of a year two, because I would probably safely assume Mel is going to pick up that player option for $28 million, 33 at this point in his career. But if this was a year one of a year two thing, there would be a lot to kind of look forward to and say, well, you just make an improvement here, maybe the chemistry improves. But again, you kind of come back to the micro where this has been a problem that's plagued the Thunder pretty much all season.
I'm glad you brought that up, because there's a couple of points I want to make off that. First, I'll start with the whole Melo situation. There realistically is a chance that Paul George could leave and Carmelo Anthony could stay. And you have a team with Russell Westbrook, Carmelo Anthony, and Steven Adams as your big three. That's a big three that I'm pretty much excited about. Then you could also bring Patrick Patterson maybe off the bench, or you could bring Grant off the bench. I mean, there's a lot of things, and I'm not even sure that that's the right lineup to put out there, but there's a lot of things you could do with that lineup, starting Carmelo Anthony, starting Russell Westbrook, and Steven Adams. So that would be fantastic, and I hope Carmelo Anthony does stay. As far as Paul George goes, if you leave and go to Los Angeles now, you're leaving a lot on the table. And not that Thunder fans would have the same kind of ire for him that they do Kevin Durant, and still prove tonight with the way that they booed him and Draymond Green. If you're Paul George, think about it. You go to Los Angeles, how good is that team going to be? And in Oklahoma City, you never really lived up to your potential. As a competitor, that would drive me nuts to know that I could have had something great just by sticking around at least one more year to give it a try, and walking away from it to go into something that may be just as good as this year, and maybe that's the best you could hope for.
Well, I mean, I guess
sort of a long way around it, but
yeah, I mean, you could look at it that way if you're a Thunder fan, but I think it's just important to just just from a fan perspective, to just, I guess, appreciate, watching three All-Stars play on the same team. And, I say three All-Stars currently. Carmelo Anthony wasn't an All-Star, but he is Carmelo Anthony. But I think it's just, the Thunder have been in reactionary mode since July 4th, 2016, when Kevin Durant went to Golden State. And we'll kind of tie this back to the game, because we'll talk about Kevin Durant. But, they've been in reactionary mode ever since then, and this is just another example of them reacting to the mega loss that is Kevin Durant. And you can't really, I guess, bash Sam Presti and ownership for making these decisions to bring Carmelo Anthony. You can't really bash them for anything, because what would you say no to that? As a GM, would you say no to that?
Well, in hindsight, and it's only in hindsight, it's very easy to say, well, Victor Oladipo turned out to have a really good year, and maybe you got rid of him a year too soon. I'll argue
he doesn't blow up unless he's on a team where he has the ball. Victor Oladipo's the same. He's the same type of player as Russell Westbrook.
And I think the change of scenery did Victor Oladipo just a lot of good, just to get someplace new and someplace fresh.
Get him out of Orlando, that did him well.
But when it comes to Thunder fans enjoying this, Thunder fans aren't going to enjoy watching three All-Stars together, at least now, unless those All-Stars are producing. Because in the present, this is all about catching that team that the Thunder were playing tonight. And they're not close to that. Thunder fans, maybe in retrospect, 10 years from now, can look back on it and think just how cool it was to have Carmelo Anthony, Paul George, and Russell Westbrook on the same team. But for right now, Thunder fans want to see results, and I can't blame them, because they feel like they were A, robbed of another championship run by Kevin Durant, and B, also robbed out of a good rivalry with Golden State. There's a lot there, and as fun as this year has been to cover, it's also been very frustrating, because all of us when this got put together, thought this team would, in a bad year, be fourth in the Western Conference. We want more. Do we deserve more as a fan base? Probably not. If we're just being honest about it, I don't know what a fan base necessarily deserves, but we want more. And it's just not happening the way that we want it. Call it selfish if you want. Fine, it's selfish, but it's a spoiled fan base. I'm one of those spoiled fans that has seen this team play really well for 9 of its 10 years here, in Oklahoma City, or 8 of the 10 if you don't count that Kevin Durant injured year. We've just we've come to expect that the Thunder will be good and in the playoffs, and that's the minimum. Making the playoffs is the minimum for this fan base.
Yeah, and we were actually kind of talking about Royce Young, Brett Dawson, and I. We were talking about in the locker room about how the Thunder have Houston on the road, Miami on the road, who is currently, I think they're the 6th seed right now in the East. They were the 8th seed a few weeks ago when they came to Oklahoma City and the Thunder defeated them. But they got those 2 on the road, and then you got Memphis at home. The way it's kind of shaping up, because Denver just won tonight, the way it's shaping up, the Thunder have to win 2 of those games. Are you confident right now that they can win 2 of those games? I'll tell you, like Houston, that's
no, I'm not.
Houston, that's an L. Miami on the road with the way they play, especially at home, and they'll probably have Hassan Whiteside this time. They didn't have Hassan Whiteside, which is why Steven Adams was able to feast so much down low in that
Is he
first
saying
game.
derogatory things against the team? Is he getting fined again?
Yeah, that is, unless he gets suspended or fined in some way. But you got that, and then you got a home game. You got a home game to finish up the season with Memphis. And for as much as you want to sit there and say as a fan that okay, that's one win, it's like, well, Memphis did the Thunder a lot of favors a few weeks ago when they started beating everybody in front of the Thunder and keeping them from falling out of the playoff race. And then as well, the Thunder, nothing's guaranteed with this team, so it doesn't really matter who they play. You don't know. And for we could sit here and say, well, there's 2 losses and a win right there, but they could turn right around and just beat the hell out of Houston the way this team plays. Go back to the first Golden State game where they run Golden State out of the Chesapeake Arena back in November, and then they go on a 3-game losing streak. So we don't really know. 80 or 78 or 79 games into the season, we still can't find like the beat of this team. And for what Russell Westbrook says in the locker room, they know what they're capable of, and they figured it out.
Yeah, but they don't show it.
Well, they don't. Yeah, I mean,
that's great, but you're not showing that you're done, and everybody's looking for somebody to blame. That's the other thing here with just sports fans in general. We want somebody to blame for all this. I don't know who you point the finger at. You can point it at Billy Donovan.
I don't necessarily think you just need to blame any. I mean, this is why fantasy sports don't work. This is an example of why fantasy sports don't work. You don't just add a player. And then you add his points per game to your team from last year and just think, oh, it's going to make that team so much better. So much more intangibles go into it, chemistry, just how things work. It's and then throw into the fact that this is a sport and you're playing against another great athlete on the other side of the court. It's just to blame somebody, to blame one person, to blame one thing, I think is just a little unfair. Because so much has to go into for a team to be successful. I mean, so much had to go into Golden State to be successful for the last few years. I mean, they had to grow organically, and of course they had Kevin Durant kind of fall into their lap. So much has had to happen for even the Thunder going back to when they had James Harden, Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook. So much has to happen, and in that same vein, so much can go wrong. And this season, you can kind of look at a handful of games and think, well, the Thunder got screwed out of that Giannis Antetokounmpo stepping out of bounds on that game-winning layup. They got screwed out of the Karl Anthony Towns moving screen. They blew a few games because of missed free throws. They had so many opportunities, so it's just to blame one person. The whole point of this, don't blame one person. It's a team sport. I guess just blame the team.
Blame the bench. Well, that'll wrap it up. Thunder lose again tonight, 111-107 to the Golden State Warriors. Houston Rockets on Saturday night here at the Peak, ABC primetime game, and it's again another TBD thing with the Thunder, to be determined on how they play, but I expect them to come out with a big time sense of urgency for that game, but I've expected that quite a bit this year.
You'd hope so.
That wraps it up for Brady Trantham. I'm Erik G saying peace, love, and Thunder up.